All right, let's go ahead and get started. We are a little after 1 o'clock. Thanks everybody for joining us for this month's BIMXT Online. Really excited to have you all here. My name is Jason Kunkel. I'm with CADD Microsystems. Going to try to help navigate us through the next hour. Excuse me. All right, so here's our mural. You can see we got a bunch of folks poking around already. Please feel free to go ahead and grab one of these blocks over here. Grab an icon that looks close to what you do. If not, grab an icon that you like the best. Stick your name and your location in there. That's going to sign you up for winning the prize. And as we are waiting here, real quick, Robert won from last month, Rojas. So congratulations. Somebody from our team will be reaching out to you with the information, but all he had to do was grab one of these. Holy cow, it's like flies. This is crazy. Just grab one of those, copy it out there, stick your name and location in there, and you are signed up. If we move our way down a little bit, you can see we've got blocks here for general questions and questions for Kate and questions for Nick. I'll keep an eye on these during their presentations and try to throw them in where they make sense. Otherwise, just navigate around the mural. Feel free to poke around and grab some information in there that you want. So with that, we will be putting that link in there periodically throughout. We don't really deal with questions in the Zoom chat. We like them over here so we can kind of consolidate and make it a little easier. So again, if you do have questions for any of our great presenters, please put them over on the mural. Speaking of our great presenters, we've got a great lineup for you all today. The first presentation is Minute to Win It, the Revit 2025 edition. That is with Kate from TYLin. I've known Kate for a long time. I saw, I guess, a cousin to this presentation years ago at an AU. I'm really excited to see the updates and what's new for 2025. So after that, we've got Nick presenting Mastering Dynamo, and Nick's from CADD. I've known Nick for a long time as well. So I know all these guys. I'm really excited to see what they have to say. They're both geniuses and really good for what they do. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing. And let's see, we're going to record. Kate, I think you're up next. If you want to pop in and try to share and we can get things kicked off.
All right, are we in?
Love it.
Okay, great. Yes, welcome to Minute to Win It, Revit 2025 edition. I have been giving this presentation or a version of it since, probably 2018. And I think I have something like 120 tips on my master list. So getting it down into 15 or 20 for today was a challenge. I thought about trying to get 40 tips into 40 minutes, but no, I don't need to be the podcast on 2x speed today. When I'm done here, I will put a link to my AU presentation from last year, Minute to Win It Revit 2024 edition. Anybody remember the game show still? Can I still keep using this title?
It's a bit of a stretch, probably.
All right, but anyway, we'll dive in and see what we got here. So I like these tips because they are tiny. They do not take an hour to understand. And the first one that I'm going to try to show, let's see if I can, there we go. All right, this is a weird one. It can be really confusing if you have never run across it before, or if you're not sure what to look for. So view range, right? I hope everybody's familiar with the basics of the view range dialog, but floors are weird. I have a floor selected in this image. It's 9 foot 11 inches below the level. The bottom offset of the view range is 6 feet and the view depth is 8 feet. So why is my floor at 10 feet still visible? Well, it turns out that any floor within 4 feet of the view range's bottom offset will show up in the view, even if it's outside the primary range, even if it's outside the view depth. Revit thinks you still want to see it. The only way to change that are to either change the bottom offset, or if you can't do that because you need it for other elements, you have to manually hide the floor. I hate manually hiding elements in Revit, but sometimes like this, it actually is your only option. Alrighty, there's a blog post floating around there that is something like 33 reasons why you can't see something in Revit. This is one of those reasons. If you're trying to figure out why you can't see a section or detail view on a plan or other referring view, it might be this property called hide at scales coarser than. It's a really handy one because it prevents your small details from showing up on bigger plans. So this section 6 here will not be displayed on an 1/8 inch scale plan. Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's not. You'll have to decide which setting for each section and detail instance, which scale will work for you. All right, I know that this has happened to all of us. The view title is longer than the line under the view itself. I have caught far too many people hitting space, 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 just to try to force the word wrap. Yeah, don't do that, please. The view schedules, like, it messes with your view schedules. Instead, if you use Control plus Enter, you can manually add a line break. Won't mess up your view schedules. Your drawings look nice. The bonus tip, you can do this in schedules too. Control Enter will force a line break in a schedule as well. This one's more of a personal preference than a tip, but I think a lot of you might share that preference. This is, of course, the Revit status bar, and the icon that I have highlighted is to drag elements on selection. So if this tip is on, like it is in the top, when you press and drag your mouse, it will select and move anything you were hovering over at the time. So if you hover over it to highlight and click and drag, it's going to drag that. Sometimes that's what you want. It saves you a click, but it can be really annoying in crowded areas. If you accidentally are highlighting a linked file, if you have families that have big bounding boxes, you'll drag stuff you didn't mean to. So I always turn it off, and then a click and drag starts a selection window every time. Another personal preference that I suspect a lot of people share, double-click edit options. If you're double-click happy occasionally like me, you can actually choose what happens when you double-click on certain objects. If you don't want to open the family editor every time you accidentally double-click on something, yeah, you can set that double-click action to do nothing. The alternatives to the default settings are always either edit type or do nothing. Except I guess views wouldn't edit type, but I like all the defaults except that family one. I've clicked on far too many things and find myself in the family editor. But as always, your method may vary. Selecting tag hosts. Anybody ever have trouble telling which object a tag is referencing? Then this tip is for you. Select the tag, click Select Host on that contextual modify tab, and the selection focus will switch to the tagged element. I like this a lot for tags that have been accidentally dragged away from their hosts. Like if there's something floating in space, you can select the tag, select host, and decide whether you need to put the tag back where it belongs or just delete it. All right, I'm showing you this tip. I do it every time, but you have to promise me that you will never use it for any number except 0. Okay? Scout's honor, promise, please? Okay. All right, let's go. Usually, if you put a number in a dimensions replaced with text, Revit will complain, right? Like it doesn't want to, it doesn't want to see this, right? It wants, if you're going to override a number, Revit wants you to override it with something like, verify in field. But there can be good reasons to show an offset, and I left out the second half of this slide. So that's going to be fun. So you don't get an image for this one, but if you right click in the replace with text field, if you right click, there will be an option for UNC characters. You can put in a non-breaking space, you can put in anything you like, and then Revit will accept the number. Once again, don't make your colleagues hate me, please. 0 inches is the only one that I've ever found a good excuse for using this override. Sorry about that. Alrighty, spell check. Moving on to spell check and annotations. You can't spell check an entire Revit model. I wish. This tip will get you a little bit closer. If you select one text element and then use select all instances in entire project, you can then run check spelling on the whole batch. Unfortunately, you have to do this one at a time with each text style. So you see I have one here with an arrow and one here with a dot. But it's faster than doing it one view at a time. Unfortunately, I still don't have any tips for schedules, dimensions, or families. Still waiting on that one, but we will come back a little bit to spell check later. All right, I think hope my modeling, yep, good, is going here. All right, keyboard shortcuts in Revit. I love it. You can use the space bar to rotate and flip elements either prior to placing them or when selecting them later. You can even, as with this column, hover over a reference and it will snap to that reference. So I love this for odd angles and tricky geometry. So if you don't know exactly what wall this is, I don't know, but you can snap and get it to match exactly. Exterior wall. This may not be as much of a problem for my architect friends who often might have a finish to help them visually see which side of the wall is the wall's exterior. But on the structural side, I get confused a lot of the time because is the wall in this image aligned to its interior face or its exterior face? Turns out Revit gives us a hint. The flip arrows are always on the exterior side. So now, just by looking at the wall, I can tell that its location line is the interior face. Let's talk schedules. I've got a bunch of tips for schedules, just a few here today. If you select a row in a schedule, your contextual tab will give you highlight in model. When you click that, you can use it to open views containing those elements. So if you're ever wondering, why is that in this schedule? This will help you figure it out. This, the show element in view dialog always displays, even if you've only selected one 2D element that can only exist in one view, and that's fine, it'll still show up, but you can just close it. This is, once upon a time was a new tip in this presentation. It's a few years old at this point. Revit 2022 gave us the ability to split text-based schedules across sheets. My structural friends have been able to split graphical column schedules for much longer than that, but 2022 got us text-based schedules. So if you right-click on the schedule in the project browser, love those right-click tools, you find split and place. You choose your destination sheets, place the schedule, and then those new segments show up in the project browser. It's a nice extra visual hint that something exists on multiple sheets. If you need to adjust the divisions later, there is a blue circular grip at the bottom of each segment. The same kind of grip that you would use if you were splitting the schedule into segments on the same sheet. So just remember, if you're doing this and your schedule is split across sheets, you got to check the other sheets to see what happens when you change that grip. Revision clouds. Let's talk about revisions. Let's say there's a revision that you don't want to show on your sheets because you need to issue the response to RFI 103, but you've got some information that is coming for RFI 120 later. But you don't want to see that tag yet. So a couple of options. You could temporarily delete the clouds and then undo them to bring them back after you print your sheets. But it technically works, pretty risky. You can also use a PDF editor to modify the title block after you print. Again, it would work, but then you have to do the work in the PDF and you have to do it every time you print. So instead, my favorite method is to blank out the revision number and the date and the description in the revisions dialog, set the show column to none. I will put the information from the date and description in the issued to and issued by fields, which you can get away with that if those aren't actually in your schedule, in your title block. For us, they usually aren't. That helps you remember later what the revision was supposed to be for. Nothing deleted, nothing to restore. Skipping over to phases, I've got a couple things It will help you collaborate with others when working with phases in Revit models. If you have a linked model in your file that does not have the same phase names or the same number of phases as your model, you can go to the link's type properties and then the phase mapping dialog to define the relationship. So in this case, my model has existing phase 1 and new construction. The linked model just has existing and new construction. So I've decided that for this particular model, the link's new construction is the same as my phase 1. And here's the other thing for phases that is absolutely critical for coordination between design team members on a phased project. In order for a phase filter to work on a linked model, that phase filter must exist in both the host and the link. So if you have customized your phase filters in any way, please tell your team, all of them. Like the 3 that are highlighted in this image are not in the default template. At least they certainly weren't at the time I created the image. So, because you see we have existing and we have show existing plus demo, and then a little ways down is show previous and demo. So if I want somebody else to be able to use these filters, they have to put them in their model, or more correctly, if I want their model to obey my phase filter names, they have to put those phase filters in their model as well. They can have whatever settings they want as far as graphic overrides, but the phase has to exist. Highly recommend putting that in your BIM coordination plan if it's not there already. My last of the non-Revit 2025 tips today is actually, I got this from a Revit DC user group meeting way back when from our good friend, Dana Filippi. Borrowed it ever since and given her credit ever since. If you have ever wanted to know who created a particular element, hopefully it's because you want to give them a compliment on their modeling skills, but you know, maybe not. Revit will let you do that. If you turn on one of the work sharing display options, doesn't matter which one, hover over that element and you will get a pop-up with the element creator's name and the last person to update the element. So in this case, I own the object, but my colleague Eliza is the one who made the floor. Now, if you have to recreate your central file for any reason, this all gets reset and everything gets assigned to the person who recreates the central file. But in the meantime, good luck with your detective work. All right, I promised the Revit 2025 edition, so here we go. First up, in context spell check. I said we were coming back. It's here. AutoCAD has had this for years. Finally, it's Revit's turn. If you have a typo, it will now get a red underline when you are editing the text element. It's only there while you're editing it, goes away otherwise, so you still have to pay attention, but I think this is progress. You will also note that this is only for 2025.3, so if you haven't done those minor upgrades yet, you might want to think about that. This is for anybody who is picky about lining up their text elements in a view. You can now select multiple tags, multiple keynotes, multiple text elements, multiples of all of them. You can mix and match and align them by their left, their right, or their centers. You can even use the 2 icons on the right next to the filter funnel to distribute the annotations evenly across a horizontal or a vertical space. This has been like, anybody who likes things nice and tidy and lined up, this one's for you. Another little one from 2025, if you have ever had trouble finding a specific parameter in the properties palette, here's something that they've added to help those of us out. You can sort the entries within each section, so not the whole properties palette, but within each section, you can now sort them alphabetically, A to Z, Z to A. Once you found what you needed, you can also return it to the default order. That's the icon on the left. Since sometimes you or your BIM managers, you probably put the properties in a specific order for a reason, so they don't destroy the default order once it's here. Next up, anybody out there ever needed the same sheet number in phase 1 and phase 2, as an example, but with different content on each sheet? It's rare, but it's happened to me. And have any of you perhaps resorted to using, oh, I don't know, a random non-printable character in order to trick Revit into accepting the duplicate sheet numbers? Yeah, I hope not, but I won't tell if you did. Regardless, those days are over with 2025. If you right-click in the sheet section of the project browser, you can create a new sheet collection. Sheets within that collection still have to have unique numbers, but sheets in different collections can have the same number. I don't promise that you won't get confused still with this, but I think it's a step forward, eliminating some workarounds. You can see in that I have 2 collections, one for phase 1 and one for phase 2, and they have different cover sheets with the same number. All right, last but not least, it's a tiny tip, but one that could be a time saver. You can now export your PDF files in the background, enabling you to keep working in the model while Revit exports the files. On the one hand, I am sorry to take away your excuse for a coffee break while you export your set, but on the other hand, it might save you when you're trying to print something and keep working. I've only scratched the surface of the stuff that's available in 2025, but these are the things that I thought I could explain in a minute or less. So I will, like I said, I'll put the AU link in the mural when we're done here, and back.
I beat you to it, Kate.
Oh, fantastic. Did you catch your call out? I put that tip in every one of my presentations now.
I did. I was only a few minutes late. Thank you, Jason, for filling in for me. And of course, always love Kate's presentations. I will go ahead and share my screen and show you guys that I did go ahead and add in her 2024 edition. So none of the awesome 2025 tips that you guys saw today will be in there. Do you have a 2025 link for that? If maybe I can replace this one.
No, this is so you're the first one to request the 2025. So yep, nothing yet. But I can put in some of the links that I used to find the tips for
absolutely. And I know this group in particular is going to love that align feature, right? You can see how organized we BIM folks are. So those align text features are obviously very, very useful for us.
Yeah, we've been waiting for that.
Absolutely, we all have, right? So thank you guys all for joining the mural. Those of you all who have added your location, we very much appreciate that. We do have the link to the mural in the chat. If you haven't joined us already, make sure you add in at very least your location. You can see Robert, congratulations, you're our winner from last meeting. Someone from CADD Micro will reach out and give you a gift card of sorts. So thank you so much for participating if you're part of the group today. We do also have a few questions for you, Kate. So does transfer project standards work for phase filters?
Oh, it's been a while since I've checked that.
I don't know myself, honestly. I'd have to go in. I'm going to say yes.
I think so.
I want to caveat that with I would need to double check.
I don't
Jason,
have
anybody else know off the top,
at
Nick?
the moment to check.
We could definitely have a comment and for sure answer for that on the mural by the end of the meeting. Spell check. I believe it is just for text boxes, isn't it? So
yeah,
parameter values, it won't read those.
No parameter values, no dimensions.
And then is there a fix to fix the text running outside of the schedule when exporting or printing to PDF?
I have not personally run across that one.
I guess my question would be, does it look fine on screen and then during the export or print get jumbled? Because I think that would be a separate issue. Well,
it sounds, if I'm reading the question right, that printing looks okay, but exporting doesn't.
Right.
So there must be something related to the driver you're using. It's behind the scenes. I am not sure.
I would agree that it would probably be related to the export. Remember, you can export to PDF. For those of you guys who are printing PDFs, you may not want to print PDFs anymore. And of course, there's all of the amazing add-ins, you know, the Bluebeam buttons and all of those things. It could be a text issue. I know that sometimes Revit and translating to different types of fonts that aren't the native ones can sometimes become a problem. So that could be an issue as well. I would probably run that up to your IT or Autodesk, actually, if that's an ongoing issue. Please continue to bring your questions, even if you have some for Kate.
Andrew's answered our question about the phase filters. Could put a little screenshot in there. Yes.
We were correct in the assumption. So yes, absolutely. Also, you're going to want to make sure that your phases are the same, right, Kane? If you add a phase, like a previous construction phase or a future construction phase, those will want to look up the same across links as well. Just another little tip.
You can work around that with mapping phase names. So like if plumbing has 3 phases, but structure only has 1 or 2, you can work around that. But yeah, communication, tell people how many phases you have.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So don't forget, there is, if you want to get to her tips once again, the link here for her Autodesk University presentation. We also, I believe, had her present her 2022 Revit tips over here. So we also have a BIM XT Revit tip video. All of our previous meetings you can get to on the right side there. Anything that you'd like to revisit. And please, also, fill out our survey. You can see up in the top left-hand corner if you have any presentations that you'd like to give or that you'd like to see. We'd always love to see those. Well, thank you, Kate. Fantastic presentation, as always. I feel like I always learn something new, even though I've seen it multiple times. It's like some of these things I've had set as defaults for so long, you forget that they're not out of the box, right? So without further ado, we'll jump over to Nick. Nick today is going to give us Dynamo tips and tricks. Of course, Dynamo over here. Very excited for Nick's presentation. How are you doing, Nick?
I'm good. I'm good.
Stop my share so you can take over.
Yeah.
I'll say while Nick is jumping in, my daughter is 5 months today. So that is why I was a little late. Not that it's an excuse, Kate. I'm sure you can understand on that one, right? You have a daughter of your own. So thank you again for both of you guys presenting today.
No problem. All right. Yep. So I'm going to go over tips and tricks. As Jason mentioned, I'm with CADD Microsystems. I've been here now for 8 years, and before that, I did corporate interior design. I'm going to start with some basics because it seems like a great place to go. And who doesn't love a shortcut, as Kate was mentioning earlier? Some of the frequent ones I've put on this screen, as well as some screenshots. There are 2 that are actually relatively new. Control K and Control Shift I. I'm going to get into more of what those do. Some of my favorite are create a note, switch between the background and the graph, and then the good old F5 to run the graph when you're in manual mode. Searching, you can always search the library. We knew this, and we can right click in the graph space to do a search. They've gotten those to actually return the same results now because they didn't used to. The other thing that's interesting, if you do it in the library, it gives you the name of the group that node is in, and you can click on that and it will take you to that section in the library so you can find similar nodes with it. If you have to change your outputs from one node to another, like you're modifying your graph, you can hold the Shift key and left mouse click. You don't need to drag, it's just a click, and then you click what output you want it to move to. Notes, use them, please, please, please. They give us lots of different ways to create notes. You have group titles, we've had those for years. We've had what I like to call a note node, because just note doesn't seem to make sense. That's the Control W. They added the ability to pin those to a node so that when you move the note moves with it, which is great. And they also added the ability to add a description to your group, so you can have a short title and then a long description of what in the world's going on. And then finally, if you're using code blocks, you can use 2 forward slashes in a row to create a comment line, and anything on that line will be ignored until you hit the enter key. So just a couple of ways you can add notes. Speaking of code blocks, they are great for shorthand. If you put it in any text inside of double quotes, it'll be counted as a string. If you just type a number, it'll be counted as a number. True and false Boolean values, just type it in lowercase. You can access any of the Dynamo nodes straight from the code block. So if you needed to create a point at a coordinate, as is shown here, you could type in the values, and then you could actually set that to a variable. We can use variables in code blocks, and you can then use that point to create a circle all in one node. Anytime you have a semicolon at the end, that counts as an output and also as a new line. And then if you need a quote, a double quote in text, you need to use the backslash character. That's what's called an escape character. Also, if you need a backslash, like you're putting a file name in, you need to put 2 backslashes, because the first one tells the system that it needs to pay attention to the next character. It uses design script. There is a guide that Dynamo BIM put out long ago. It's still valid because they haven't changed it. So it has a lot of things you can do. You can do more with them. Some of the things that people also explore is the definitions and for loops and while loops. But that's getting further into that than I want to. Also, speaking of code blocks, we can make a range and a sequence. This is really more in that design script, less, being able to read it. We have nodes for those two, which is great. Just as a reminder, a range, you specify the start, you specify the end, and what is it going to count by? So in the case of this, you'd get 2, 4, 6, and 8, or 0, 2, 4, 6, and 8. In a sequence, you're specifying where you're starting, 0, how many you want 9, and you're counting by 2. So you would get 0 to 16. And then finally, what we can do that there isn't a node for that I'm aware of is what I would call an advanced range, where you specify the start, you specify the end, and then you specify how many you want, and it calculates an equal spacing. So it's very similar to in Revit using a linear array with last, where you specify the first point, you specify the last point, and how many you want. So in this case, where you're starting at 0, going to 10, and I want 3 of them, it's going to generate the numbers 0, 5, and 10. Some list management. I always find that it's great to go through list lacing because it confuses pretty much everybody. It controls how nodes handle inputs with multiple lists. And those list values could have varying quantities of items in that list. So there's 3 main ones. And then there's auto, where it tries to pick the one that makes the most sense. Shortest is the most common, where it takes a 1-to-1 processing. So item at index 0 goes to 0, 1-to-1, and so on down the line. And whenever it runs out, in whichever list it runs out first, it just stops and ignores the rest. The next one is longest. It does the same thing, except once it runs out on the shorter list, it just processes all the extra to the last one. I'll be honest, I don't find a need for longest all that often. It does have some cases where it's useful. But the next one I find is actually, if you're going to override, I find it's the one that you end up using the most, and that is cross product. This you will use anytime that you want to compare two lists, where you want to find out, are these items in this other list of things. In this little example here, we're using the room is inside point, or point is in a room, and it's checking to see if those points exist in the room. You're going to want to set that to cross product. Otherwise, you're never going to get the answer you want. It will, when you set it to cross product, you will always get an additional list level, but it's not doing it randomly. It's easiest to explain when you only have two lists like this one. What it's going to do is the lowest list level, in this case, level 1, is going to be the indexes of all the points. And list level 2 is going to match the indexes of the first input, in this case, rooms. So at L1 is room 1, or level 2's index 1 is room index 1, and then the 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on match up with the points. So it's not randomly doing this. It's very methodical. And then you can use a get item at index, or index of the true value, to find out if there's only one true. In this case, we were looking for the point on what room it's in, which is why there's a transpose in between there. So theoretically, it should only exist in one room if you filtered your rooms properly. So, and then you can use the get item at index to do that. I went the wrong way. Sorry about that. Data organization, thinking of list levels. Dictionaries are amazing at organizing your data structures. You can just look here. The 1 is lists and indices, and you have to remember that, oh, index 1 is the name, index 2 is the number, index 3 is this, index 1 is the room. If you use a dictionary, those all go to what are called keys. Dictionaries are not indexed. They use a key, which is a string. And so you can actually assign a name to it. So we know that it's the name, we know it's the number, we know it's the room element, and then we can just ask the dictionary for that value. It does have to be a string, so pay attention to that. When you're bringing in Excel data, it works really well if it's like a table. That way you can assign the headers to each value. Also, with organization, sometimes we need to add, we need to sort items. Sorting the items, because a lot of times when you grab things, it comes in the order it was created. There's 3 different ways of sorting. It all depends on what you want as the output. There's the plain old list sort, which just works mostly with strings. But the 2 more frequent ones are sort by key, which requires both the items that are being sorted and a list with the exact same count. And that's what's going to use to organize the other one. And then there's sort by function. This one I like to point out because the function node says that it's missing an input. It's not. We can ignore that red input because the sorting node knows to take the list input and match it to the input of the function node that is missing an input. So when they added that color coding, I liked it, but at the same rate, it confused people in this situation. So sometimes we need to group. We have very similar nodes with grouping. The one difference between grouping and sorting changes the index order, but it does not change the list levels. Grouping does. So we're completely changing the list level information. We're adding normally at least 1 list level, sometimes more. And data can be sorted within those new groupings. Just pay attention to your list level setting on your input. And then kind of jumping on the what's new kind of thing, autocomplete has been around for a while, but you had to enable it under advanced features or experimental features. So unless you knew it was there, they've gotten it a lot better with predictions and percentages, and it doesn't move your stuff around quite as much as it's shown. Also, in newer versions, you can actually use it on output nodes. So when you're getting started and you're like, what in the world goes into this node? You can double click on it and it will give you a list of the most commonly used ones. After version 2.7, so basically Revit 24 and later, it automatically is enabled. You don't have to go into the settings. Sorry, I don't have the civil version that it's associated with. I don't have that log, but they also added a custom drop-down menu that will work with Dynamo Player. So yes, there's data shapes out there that can create your own personal user interface, but if you don't have to use it, you don't need to. This one lets you specify a drop-down and then a corresponding number. It's frequently used with a get item at index. That way you can give the users a drop-down in Dynamo Player with select options, and then it will pull information as you need it. It's not quite as nice as being able to create a drop-down from the Revit data, but it's kind of a step in the right direction. Insert Dynamo definition. This was added in version 2.18, which was 24.1. Basically what it does is it lets you select another Dynamo script and it inserts the entire script into your file. So if you create a series of files that have frequent combinations of nodes, you can really increase your speed and efficiency at generating new scripts. The example that was here was showing a insert for pulling data from Excel. So it brings in the browse file node, the convert the file path to the file, the Excel import, a string parameter or node, so you can enter what sheet name is, true, false for whether it's reading a string or showing Excel. And then it's even got nodes there that automatically take the table and throw it into a dictionary. All with a simple click. They did add a shortcut for this, Control-Shift-I. I did notice in some versions that if you insert one and then you go to insert another before you close this file, it won't let you. It only lets you insert like one. And then if you close the file and open it again, it'll let you insert again. So I'm not really sure what's going on there, but it still is a great way to speed up frequent combinations. We all love the pin preview. It's so much easier than creating a watch node every time. And we tend to have a whole bunch of them open at once. But when we're done and we're trying to clean everything up and make it readable and add our notes because we skipped that the first time, it's kind of annoying to sit there and close every one. They did add a shortcut key for this in 3.2, which is 25.2, and that is Control K. Speaking about the keeping up with your point versions, there are changes at the point version, new features, not just with Revit, but also with Dynamo. Update Python engine. This was actually in the last release of Revit, the latest one. If you need, sometimes you end up with a whole bunch of Python nodes in a script. Rather than going manually to each one and updating its engine, there's been a lot of talk about the engines and switching the engines in the last couple of versions, and they're going to change it again. This is one place you can go and it'll either affect every node if you have nothing selected, or it will affect only the Python nodes that you have selected, and you can override it for the entire graph. Right now, you're going to have to deal with this as a package extension that you'll install. It's called TuneUp. after 3.4, which hasn't been put in any version of any software that I'm aware of yet, desktop software anyway, it's included in that version. What this does, it's released by the Dynamo team, and it analyzes and tracks how long each node takes to run in your graph. So you can pinpoint where in your graph is taking the most time. And it allows you to really optimize your graph so that increase speed and time of processing. Jumping back on the dictionaries, looking up a dictionary value, like I was showing in there, is significantly faster than the get item at index. So you can also export this out to a CSV and analyze it in Excel. Just pay attention that, like with data shapes or any of your custom user interfaces, that timing is going to be dependent on whoever it is that's clicking around. So that one you can ignore, but it also has the ability to group everything. It's available as a package extension. I believe it goes all the way back to 22. I know I've tried it in 24 and 5. So a couple of last things, settings. There is a Dynamo settings file. It pretty much has every preference you can want dictated in it. It's an XML file. It's all spelled out. Package folder location, trusted locations, everything like that. If you are managing your company's Dynamo stuff, you're going to want to edit this. Also, a little trick in preferences under group styles, if you already had your own and you don't want to use theirs, it doesn't let you override the ones that are out of the box. If you go to the XML file, you can override them and you can change the colors of like input and everything so you can get it to match your styles, not the one that they're dictating in the preferences. Dynamo Player, it also tracks the folders there. By default, it uses the folder name in that drop-down list. I work on a lot of companies' stuff, and they all have the folder like scripts. And so in my drop-down, it just says scripts, and I can't use that for anything. You can actually change the name of the drop-down that's displayed as opposed to just having the file name or the folder name at the end. And then with that file, if you customize it in one place, it's stored under app data, your Dynamo product folder. It's here. You can actually include that with a custom deployment package. So I'm not talking about Dynamo packages. I'm talking about software deployment packages. In the configurations, all the way down at the bottom, there is a include Dynamo setting file. And you can add that. Now, I will say that I have seen this not deploy, kind of like the Revit INI file doesn't always deploy, but it also works a lot of the time as well. So you might need a manual method to deploy it on the just in case side, but there is a way where you can tie it in and it does get deployed. And then I'm going to end on just some really helpful resources. The Dynamo blog, they normally tell you what's new, and then you're stuck sitting here twiddling your thumbs until they roll it in to your software because you want to see it. The forum, tons of people are there. That thing has been up there for years. It probably has your answer already that you haven't even realized that you wanted to ask, unless it deals with a new functionality. Just because it's been up there for so long and people have figured out the workflows. Our blog, we post stuff every once in a while about it. Revit API docs, that lists everything that you're allowed to do or everything Dynamo can do. It's not the official source, but it pretty much is a copy of it. So if it doesn't say it's possible, that means Dynamo can't do it. Recommended packages, these are your tried and true. If you go to anywhere, you ask anybody, they're going to list all these out. The one on there that may not show up on everyone's list is TuneUp because it's relatively new. And then Lookup or Snoop. it allows you to select elements in the Revit interface and see all of their data properties. Very useful for trying to figure out, is this data at the instance level, the type level, the family level, or the category level? So that is it for my presentation.
Well, you missed a helpful resource, your webinar that's coming out on February 18th.
Oh, I did. I did not do that. That
Well,
shameless
luckily,
plug.
I believe Emily, who's always behind the scenes making things happen, she went ahead and threw that up there in addition to the CAD blog under Nick's area. I went ahead and also threw up the Dynamo primer. That's a fantastic
Yes.
resource. They also have this list of recommended packages, the most downloaded, the most used, the most relied on, all those wonderful things. So definitely
They're
check
pretty
those
much
out.
the same list, regardless of which one of those you pick.
You got it. It's like the same top 10, right?
Yep.
Absolutely. And I will say that custom node, I know what I'm going to be doing when I get back to maternity leave, right? Customizing all my Dynamo scripts to have custom inputs. That's fantastic.
Yep.
So I've even learned something from Nick's presentation. Love that.
They
Yeah.
sneak things in there every
They
once in a
do.
while.
They do. I've been trying to close my eyes to it, so I'm gonna have a lot to look at when I come back. We do have now 2 questions, or maybe a comment as well. Heather has a comment. I'm sad I can't get Revit lookup to install correctly on my computer. That's very unfortunate because
Yes.
Revit lookup is fantastic. I'll also say Revit API docs is something I use very frequently to understand the API and all of these different kinds of jargon and things that you can type in the code blocks for us that aren't natural coders. That definitely helps.
Sometimes it's just is this even possible thing?
Absolutely.
Like, for the longest time,
the API.
You couldn't create ceilings.
Right.
So,
One question that's a little complicated here. Could we use list lacing to generate views if we have 2 design options in the same location, like furniture layouts compared to floor layouts? So Nick,
theoretically, yes. Yeah.
I'm not even necessarily sure you would need list lacing depending on how you went about script, right? So it really depends on how you're grabbing or creating those views in the kind of method that you're using it. But what you're asking is totally possible.
Yeah. The obvious one I can think of is the good old enlarged room plans that everybody loves to make from rooms or areas.
You have a scope box, or I guess you could even create a bounding box around the room itself. Absolutely. You could totally create views and then just swap what that view is looking at in terms of its design option or any other visibility graphic settings. Well, we are at the top of our hour. Please continue to bring questions to us. Please fill out that survey. Once again, we do have all of our meetings linked into the mural, so you can get to all of our previous meetings, in addition to all of our information. If I share my screen here once again, you can see that Nick, who happens to be one of our board members, as well as all of our presenters and other board members, you can get to them here if you have additional questions. And please check out Nick's presentation for Dynamo for Revit overview. Went ahead and also added a few links that Kate shared with us. What's new in Revit 2025, both from Dan Stein and Nick with Revit Pure, both fantastic presenters, expert elites. They know exactly what they're talking about. So make sure you check those out. And thank you all for joining us today. And especially thank you for Kate and Nick for presenting today.
And I added the second half of my dimension tip to
Oh, fantastic.
the image that I left out.
Oh, there we go. And that's new for me too. I didn't realize that was a possibility. So yeah, right clicking in that override dimension. Fantastic.